Oh, good evening, everyone. Just before we get started, this is just to let everyone know that the meeting is being live streamed onto YouTube, and we also have participants by Zoom. If you wish to participate on Zoom, if you need to speak, can you put your camera on? Otherwise, if you're just listening and observing the meeting, can you turn your camera off and also mute? People in the room, if you want to speak, if you could say your name first, that will allow the camera and the microphones to pick up your voice and locate to you. I hope that's clear, everybody.
Okay, so good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Economic Development and Planning Committee. Are there any matters of public participation that are not on the agenda, just in case you had something other than Sherwood Avenue you wanted to talk about? No? Okay. Adrian, I know that you're online and going to be talking to us about electric vehicles. Would you be an absolute star and let us just deal with one planning application before you start, because we've got some members of the public here for it, and I think we should only put them through so much pain of an evening. We just need to do a couple of technical things first, which is apologies.
Apologies from Councillor Mortimer, Councillor Oatley and Councillor Raby.
Okay, so we will skip, with Council's permission, directly to item 5 and take the 4th planning application on there, which is land at 14 Sherwood Avenue, Melksham, a proposed single-storey 2-bedroom bungalow. So how I propose to do this is we will initially just take a look at the application, take a look at the plans and take any information from officers that they have for us. We'll then invite you to make any representations you want to make. Once you've made those representations, we'll move into debate. So at that point, you can no longer take part in the discussion. But what I will do, with Council's permission, is just before we go to the vote, I'll just ask you if there's anything that has been raised during the debate that you perhaps would want to respond to, just so that you don't walk out thinking, but they didn't think about such and such, which can just really get to you, can't it? So in the first instance, if we could perhaps pull up the location plan, Christine.
No, it's me who's doing it.
Oh, sorry, the location plan, Patsy. That's not on the big screen.
No, I'm just moving around.
Oh, we're going posh now.
Because I want to move.
And is that being shared on Zoom?
They are seeing what we're seeing on that screen.
Okay.
Colin.
Can we rotate it? We should be able to do that by now, shouldn't we?
Yeah, there we go. Right, okay, so let's just have a look at the map bit first so we can see exactly where we're talking about. If we must just maximise that, perhaps it'll probably give, there we are. So we can see the site plan there. We can see where we are talking about, and I think you can see the floor plan imposed onto the map there. And then we've got elevations, and a slightly bigger imposed floor plan on there. Is there anything, Linda, that we need to be aware of that's come through on this?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
No.
Okay. So I'm going to propose we suspend standing orders for a moment, folks. Can I have a seconder for that? Seconded by the Vice Chair. All those in favour? It's amazing what we have to do in council meetings. So please, if you could tell us who you are and what you want to say about the application. The floor is yours. And if you can try and keep any comments to no more than 3 minutes, we'd be really grateful. Each, that is.
Name is Kate Thomas. I live diagonally opposite on the last house in Ashdown Drive, opposite this bungalow.
Right.
My concerns are twofold. It's parking and it's access. to this proposed. For parking, we're already that we haven't got enough parking in the road there. Most houses are 2 cars. I myself has 2 cars, but I'm lucky enough mine are both off the road. The house next door to me is 2 cars, 1 on the drive, 1 on the road. Next house, same again, 1 on the drive, 1 on the road. Yeah, we're a cul-de-sac, and it goes all the way down that you end up of an evening and the whole of one side of the road has got vehicles all the way down it. The turning space there, that the one which goes towards where it says Epping, there is always 2 cars parked there every night. They're there majority of the day as well. Quite often where you've got the A, that turning part there, there's cars parked there during the day as well. And this is before you get any visitors. So we've got a lack of parking. If you put that bungalow in there, you then lose a parking space that's already being used as a driveway for that bungalow. They've got 2 cars, one that they park on the driveway of the garage, which goes with that bungalow opposite, and the other car they park on their driveway. You'll be losing that to make access in. And also, I've got great concerns for vehicles coming down, such as emergency vehicles, can't get down smooth. Quite often, even the dust cart, as it is, can't make it to the end. Some places emptying our bins because there's so many vehicles down there. That's mainly my concerns.
Those are pretty valid, legitimate. Anyone else?
Yes, Mrs. Wiltshire here. Ian's were the ones, we're at number 9, which is over the fence to 14. We're at number 9 Epping Walk, and we're going to be the ones most affected because of the proximity of this new bungalow to ours, being only a metre away from the boundary line. Also, we have a conservatory which will be blocked out, probably some of the light by the roof of this place. And we just think it's sort of overdevelopment really in a very small space. And the parking, again, I would have said very same as what Kay had said. And the amenities is very important as well. So it just not viable to be fitted in there, we don't think. I think that's all.
Okay, thank you very much. Sir, you concur with...
He's the driver.
And
But he's married to me.
The only thing is they've got windows back looking straight over to us as well. You know, at the back.
Yeah, I see.
So it's a privacy thing as well.
I wonder if, can I stretch your technology and ask you to go to Google Maps? Because I'm looking at it on Google Maps and Street View now, and actually I think it highlights some of these concerns much better than that does.
It's a very small site, you know, for a bungalow.
I mean, search Google Maps if you just put in Epping Drive. And there you are, Epping Drive, Melcham's third one down. But you can get to it from it, having done it. I just and then right, the one you want is the road just above Epping Drive with the sort of thing. Go up that one there. So if you come down, click on the little man in the corner.
I can't. Oh, there he is. Yeah.
Yeah, and then drag that onto that one. There you go. That'll do. Did you? No, you didn't drag it onto it.
Drag and drop. Do you know? Right click. Okay.
Double click on it then.
Blue lines.
Sorry,
You've got to drop onto one of the blue.
No, in fairness, perhaps it was. If you just go to the road, don't click first, go to the road now. And double click on it. There you go. Right, so these two garages that we can see here, these are the two parking spaces that they're talking about in their application. Like, can you zoom out slightly or come backwards?
No, we got those garages belong to them.
Right, so that's seen as four spaces, and that's quite.
That's not 4 spaces in front of them garages.
Are they done?
They're far too
Double and a
long.
single, it's a double and a single, it looks like.
it's like a double.
Because go back to the tab with the agenda pack on. Don't close any, just not that one, the next one, that one. Oh, have we closed the drawing?
The drawing is probably hidden now. There we are.
Oh, you had it, okay, yeah. Come back into that for me, sorry, I'm just. And so where it's showing next to the 8, no, stay there. It's showing the parking for proposal. They look like 2 single parking bays, don't they?
Yeah,
That's 2 garages.
That's those 2 garages, but the first of those 2 garages looks like a double on the street.
No, they're only single garages.
They are both single garages, and do they both belong to number 14?
No, no, just one of them.
so number 14 is going to get that red space. So what's the new space? So 14 parks on their own space now, and the new space is going to the new development, I assume.
But the people in 14 at the moment park in front of that garage and in front of the garage that's.
Go back to the street view, Pat. Just click on the Google icon down the bottom. That's what we need to do. There. That's it. And then just go to that one. Perfect. Can we spin round? Can you spin round 100?
Come on.
I tell you what, do you want to give me the mouse?
Feel free.
It's just that what I want to do, I want to go back down the road a little bit and then look at it. Well, it's a little bit too far. So those are the garages just there.
Yes,
This here, is that number 14?
yes.
Right, so they've got a garage there as well. So they've got 2 garages.
No, they've got one of those, what we were talking about.
So whose garage is this one here?
Oh, that's there, but yeah.
Oh, yes, that's being that one now.
So they've, right, okay. So they've got 2 garages there and they want to put this new house here
Behind,
behind the substation.
Behind that wall, yeah, yeah.
the substation is on our land,
Well,
all that gravel there.
So this gravel here,
Yes, that belongs to us.
so how are they going to access this new house?
Well, not by knocking the garage down, which is adjoining to number 14 at the moment.
Right, so they won't have a garage after this, they won't have a drive after this.
The garage would be gone from the house, but he's bought that one in the corner, what we were talking about just now.
That's the one that's highlighted red on the line.
But is he highlighting that? Sorry, I might be being a bit stupid.
It does say parking proposal.
Yeah, but I assumed that was parking proposal for the new development.
Yeah, it does make it look.
So in which case, what parking would there be for the existing property?
Yeah.
Go back to that plan view, go back to the thingy view.
That would be down there.
So, there was the,
Is it worth looking at the application itself?
There's no indication of parking down here, is there?
I've looked, I can't see it anywhere.
and it's not actually showing before and after really, is it?
No,
Not very well.
It's not showing the entrance.
no.
No. Simon?
I wonder, just look at the plans, would you be able to go up to the screen and just point out on that diagram what's your land and what's their land? Just for, because I'm a bit confused about access,
Yes.
if your land wraps around.
Yes.
Our land is,
So your land is all of this here, is it?
yeah, that's, yeah, all the way down there.
All the way down to our house here.
Yeah, that's the substation.
That's the substation.
That's your land there.
Yes.
And they're proposing to demolish this garage
Yes.
here to
For access.
create vehicular access
Yes, yeah.
into this here. So they're saying they would be parking, I assume, somewhere in this space.
Yeah,
Can they really go without driving over your gravel?
No, but that
They want that'd be over the pavement. They would drive in. We don't let them drive over our gravel, don't we?
Well, they asked for drop curb to be put in,
Yeah.
that's, but,
We got a drop curb
yeah.
onto ours at the moment.
But that says parking for proposal, so that indicates to me that that parking space is for this proposal here.
Yeah.
Which means there will be no parking for number 14. Because if we look at this, if you come forward, the car is currently parked in front of the garage.
Yes, there's hard, you can't get it round square, they have to go onto it like.
But if that's all knocked down to
Yes.
create a vehicular access through,
Yes,
there is nowhere to park that car. So this property will have no parking at all.
not as
No.
far as.
But I think we've got some clear grounds for recommending refusal on this. I don't know, Pat.
Quite apart from the fact, John, it's far too small a plot. I mean, I was
Yes.
around there yesterday and we were measuring it out with the neighbour. And do you remember that one down Woodrow?
Oh,
It's exactly the same as that. You could build a house on it, but you can hardly walk around it. And what with the windows overlooking and, you know, there's no space at all. You know, it's just too small.
Yeah.
It's not even overdevelopment, it's just crammed, you know, literally crammed in.
fine. Well, okay, let's think then of the planning reasons we can give to recommend a refusal on this. I think the fact that it will, inadequate parking, I think is a clear, and I think we need to highlight in our objection that the plans as provided indicate that there would be no parking for the existing property once the development has taken place.
Yeah, that's right.
Even if it's badly labelled and the garage that's there is going to be for number 14 and they're saying the new people would park sort of behind, vehicular access in there is awful. So we recommend on in terms of vehicular access that's woefully inadequate. Yes, are we all happy?
Yes.
Did we say that? I'm just trying to remember the plans. Is it single story or two story?
Single.
Okay, so there's less of an issue on, I mean, I know it will still have sight, but it won't have oversight of you in the same way it would if it was 2 story. But I think overdevelopment would be a very clear.
The thing is, John, it would make much more sense if they were to enlarge the bungalow that's already there or put another level on it. That would make much more sense.
Well, they got in planning permission 3 years ago for that.
Oh, right.
And I think it's just ran out now that.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's not really a plot that lends itself to development unless you do something with this land here, and that's not their land. So it's not. Colin.
There's no mention of them using any of the gravel area in front of the existing property for that.
That's their property.
That's ours.
That's yours.
That's
So,
all ours, the gravel, yeah.
Let's have a look at Colin.
all right, so there is, right, so there isn't any,
Isn't that plot? No.
anything there at all.
No, they aren't coming over there
No, okay.
unless they give us $1 million or so.
It's not for sale, is it?
No,
It's certainly not for sure.
So, I mean, that just isn't. So certainly overdevelopment, I think, is and actually that proximity to the existing build.
It's
Very
It's
close.
very, very close. It's, and then the other one it reminds me of is the one in Coronation
Yes.
Road.
Yeah.
You know, just squeeze it onto the plot, never mind how close it is to the other building. I mean, apart from all the safety issues, it's just claustrophobic. You know, to step out of one door and you're faced with a building at an odd angle to you.
Does this go against neighbourhood planning anyway in terms of what?
There's nothing about infill
Yeah,
development as a policy.
but this is really,
And local plan's got some stuff about infill, isn't
Probably
it?
not, yeah.
So we need to find out whatever a local plan there is, or core strategy as it currently is, and I think impact on surrounding properties is
I think they-
legitimate, because the development, imagine developing that.
Yeah.
6 months.
Yeah.
There's also a conflict with the cars that have to park, have to go across the footway. And as you see, you've got a footway coming
Yeah.
up from the other end. And that's not ideal. I mean, it's obviously, they're not going to be going very fast, but it's not the point, is it?
Well,
I see what you mean.
yeah, here it has to overhang, and there is legislation, I understand, in Parliament about stopping vehicles parking on pavements, so about time, so so we can actually say that you know, currently vehicles have to park on the pavement for that property, and that's only going to get worse when they don't have a parking bay.
It's certainly not going to enhance the area at all.
Okay, does anyone have anything else they'd like to say on this, or can I take this to a proposal?
Yeah, I'll propose it.
Okay, well, we've got, let's just run through what we've been talking through as what we're proposing, just so we're clear. And then I will just come back and ask you if you've got anything else, and then I'll take it to the vote. So what did we have down as our objections that we wanted
We've
to?
got overdevelopment, inadequate parking. The plans don't show any parking for the existing property, and that's once the garage is demolished. And to just double check if the core strategy says anything about infill development and the concern about parking on the pavement. We know now it's against the highway code.
Yeah. I think highways access is, we need to add highways access.
And they will be overlooking from the back bedroom window to the Wiltshire's property as well.
It's 1 metre away to the boundary. Oh, where are we? On
Actually
On the
says
south side.
on the south side, is it this one?
Not
Yeah,
the
yeah,
bottom,
it
and
is.
then slightly more on the top.
So, yeah, these are all, I mean, that's only 2 metres from the boundary, from the build of that property to the build of this property. I think that's way too close for what you're allowed to have in terms of,
13 feet, isn't it?
yeah, a window can't look, you can't have a window opposite than less than that.
Well,
I think it's
be
21.
looking in straight into the back garden. Yeah. Which isn't much bigger than the committee room, so, you know.
but what we don't know is what windows there are on that building there. So I think proximity is, because if that's the east elevation, they're saying it's, or the west elevation, they're going to say no windows there. But, or is it, yeah, it's going to, I assume that that's the wall that's going to go against this. But this house, you have to take into account any windows on that property as well. And there's no way of knowing that because we're not going to get a view of that.
The wall is bedroom. It's the little girl's bedroom, isn't it? It's the little girl's bedroom, and then it's the windows for the kitchen.
Right, so there are windows along that,
Yeah.
that wall there. So it's going to have to comply with that minimum distance. Whether they're selling the property, whether they're developing it or not, it's still got to comply. Anything else anyone can think of? I think that's quite a robust case there, actually, for why we should say no to that. So I'll let Pat propose that. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Colin. So could I see all those in favour of the proposal, which is to recommend refusal on the grounds that we've run through? And you're not on this
I'm not on
committee,
this
are you? You're
committee.
here for full council, so that's unanimous of all present. So thank you very much, folks. What will happen now is we will send our whose patch is this in?
Not, it used to be mine,
Right, I suggest that we also ask Councillor Oakley to call in the application of Wiltshire Council. Because there's definite grounds for calling on that. So what will happen now then is we will send our feedback back to Wiltshire Council, who are the decision-making body, and that will go to the planning officer. We're also going to ask the Wiltshire councillor for that ward to do what's called a call-in on the application. And what that will mean is if the officer was minded to permit the planning application, then they will ask that it has to go to a committee of councillors at Wiltshire Council that you would be entitled to go and speak to and make representation to, and have a similar debate to this before deciding whether to approve it or not. So if the officer wanted to approve it under delegated powers, they'd be told it's got to go through a committee of councillors first. And I'm sure that the clerk and Councillor Oatley will be in touch with you about that if it goes to that stage. Yeah, keep an eye on it, and it will take a little while yet, but
Do we need to send a letter into Wilts?
it's well worthwhile you're sending an objection to Wiltshire Council. Absolutely, yes. And anyone else who does as well. And my recommendation is, if you've got 4 or 5 of you on the street who want to object to it, send 4 or 5 letters. Don't send one that you all sign or a petition, because that would go to the council as 1 objection. Whereas if you send 5 letters, it will go as 5 objections. Well, there you are. So thank you very much for coming down. There's no obligation to stay, although you're more than welcome to. Thank you very much, folks. Okay, so councillors, I'm going to take us back to the agenda and to item 2, electric vehicle charging. Adrian, you've been a star hanging on as we went through that. I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. I think the best thing I can do is hand over to you at this point and let you bring in the topic. So
thank you, John. Yeah, right. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, so electrical vehicle charging. I'll quickly run through the council strategy. Probably the best thing I can do is actually take questions on this, because in a way it seems very simple, but sadly it's not. So there's lots of things to think about. So for me, Wiltshire Council, where we come from, we've probably seen that we've actually adopted a brand new strategy. Now, the strategy is only a 3-year strategy, and there's a reason for that, and it's because the whole environment about electrical vehicle charging is changing every single day. So even last week, the government actually just issued a new electrical vehicle charging strategy. Another example why it's changing, I went on to a framework agreement just last week, and there were 72 providers of electrical vehicle charging points. Every single day I have someone come forward and say to me, we can provide your service. And there's so many different models out there, and if you go and charge, you'll find so many different rates. So the whole thing about electrical vehicle charging market is all changing. And really our strategy, Wiltshire Council strategy, is around trying to maximize the opportunities which will come along, but also not going down a route that might actually limit us. And I'm happy to talk about some of the issues that you may face with regards to your local considerations and some of the things that we're facing with. So what we're doing, if you look at our strategy, really at the moment in time, there's 8 focuses, and really at those 8 focuses, there's only really 3 really doing aspects. And when I mean that, you've got destination charging. And really, it's exactly as it sounds. That is charging where you go to. So obviously, your Rapid charger there in Melksham is a destination charger. You probably know the Melksham campus is putting electrical vehicle charging units in there. That's destination charging. So we focus on that. Now, really, all of our electrical vehicle charging points we have currently at Wiltshire Council that are available to the public are destination charging. They aren't really residential charging. So if you think about our current provision, it is destination charging. The next thing is about residential charging, and that residential charging is a mass array. And until yesterday, the government was actually funding home charging. So that's where obviously you go along, you put a home charging unit in your house, and the government would give you a substantial grant to actually put home chargers in. So that really meant if you had opportunity for off-road charging, there was already a good grant available, and it's also probably a logical thing to do. And if you looked at running electric vehicle, they very much do pay for themselves to charge with the vehicle if you look at the running costs to petrol. So you've got home charging, off-street charging. It's something that's probably already accounted for. But residential charging, there's a massive problem in Wiltshire with regards to all those other types of residential charging. Probably only between about 30–40% of our residents obviously have access. About 30–40% of our residents don't actually have access to home charging. So there's a real sizable number there that don't have access. And I'll talk to you about residential charging in a second. And the other big doing thing for Wiltshire Council is really practicing what it preaches, and that's converting our sites to electric vehicle charging so we can actually do our fleet. And the other things we're looking at is charging hubs, in essence, a petrol station for charging for electric. A lot of feasibility study around that. Lots of feasibility studies around, charging in your workplace. Lots of feasibility studies around, you've seen all the planning guidance that's coming up with regards to electrical vehicle charging and support for that. Of course, you've got public transport charging, which is bus and taxis, and about how we facilitate that. And of course, and then another given really for Wiltshire Council is all the electric we have has got to be sustainable electric, because the whole idea about this is to actually make sustainable travel. And that's not always a given. But for Wiltshire Council, it's about having sustainable electric. So that's for ourselves. So really it's workplace charging, residential charging, destination charging, and sustainable electric. And then over the next couple of years, a lot of feasibility studies actually into what will come out. So the local transport plan is going to come out in 2024, and that is going to be a major steer for Wiltshire Council. And also tied to that will be our new emerging electrical vehicle charging strategy. So very much the strategy we have at the moment in time is very much a holding strategy. You will see the Melksham King Street rapid charge down there, that will be replaced. So I can assure you that will be replaced. It should be going for tender next week, because likewise, we've got to do a feasibility study on supply to all of these sites. That is going to be completed this week. So we should be going to tender next week. I reckon by the autumn, your electrical vehicle charging there, that big rapid charger will be replaced. And tied to the same contract actually is the provision of 3, and they what's called fast chargers, which are 7 kilowatts. So if you think an average engine, well, a small electric powered engine will be about 60 kilowatts. So your, in essence, your 44 kilowatt charger will probably charge that up with about an hour, and your Melksham Campus one is a 7 kilowatt. So if you think about 10 hours to charge up, to charge that up, but they are good. If you want a little top up charge, those sort of things, and they do mean that people do stay in the town when they're charging up. But that is really what Wiltshire Council has planned for destination charging. So at the moment in time, Wiltshire Council itself isn't doing any more than that in the next 2 years, up to 2024. We are looking at things such as allowing people to charge over the pavement. Now that is already, as you can imagine, raised some concern with cables over pavements. There is a guidance how you do that with mats, but obviously that does cause a little bit of concern to maybe people with visual issues and those sort of problems. But that's what we're actually looking at. And we are very much looking to work with towns, allowing them access to what's called OZEF funding, which is the government funding. And I'll talk to you about that in a second, and I'll send the slides through to Linda, obviously, at the end, so you've got all this. But really, there's an awful lot of government funding around for residents who can't charge at home. So there's a considerable amount of funding. They've just launched another package this week again of government funding, and I'm actually attending the presentations tomorrow, so I'll know a little bit more about that. But the government's got an awful lot of funding with regards to trying to assist people who can't charge at home, with regards to grants through local authorities, to allow them to do that. So we're looking to try and work with town and parish councils for that, but it's very much being driven by the town and parish councils in which they reside. We have a small funding pot, which will be announced in the summer with regards to a small grant that can be available, but it worked with it's called OZEF, but the actual funding is called AUX funding. Works the AUX funding, it can mean that there is very little cost to the local town and parish councils if you can get an AUX funding with our grant funding. We've got about £70,000 put aside for the next 2 years, say up to 2024, to actually help with that. And then we actually really talk again a lot more about what we're doing. But Wiltshire Council, a big heads up though, currently, obviously our electricity supply to our electric vehicle charging units was free. When the policy was passed through, it was decided that we'd make a charge for that electricity, and the charge promoted was 35 pence. I don't know where we are now with this escalating price of electricity, but at the time when the strategy was actually launched, it was 35p. At the moment in time, we've still got that commitment of 35p, but I would imagine that that's going to become very much under pressure. So the destination charging, your King's your King Street one, your 44 kilowatt one will be replaced. You'll get 3 small electric vehicle chargers at the campus, and then Wiltshire Council is looking to work with town and parish councils with a small grant that's going to be launched actually in the summer. Now, just very quickly, hope it helps, just very quickly to take you through the grant. The grant is for the central government is up to £13,000 per vehicle, electric vehicle charging point, and they will give 75% funding to that. So where you've got multiple, so what we've been doing, what we've done historically is sort of look to wrap about 4 electrical vehicle charging points together. Usually with infrastructure costs, that's been running around about £30,000, of which the government has been, sort of committed to 75% of that. So that's £25,000. We have a small grant, say it's going to be available in the summer. So you can imagine there's a £5,000 cost there for those sort of costings that would then be partly met by Wiltshire Council's grant, and then looking to the town and parish councils to build the rest up. But that's where we are. You can, the upper limit of that grant, so there are, I'll send this all through to you, but there's limit is up to about £100,000 worth of funding. And there's various criteria, so I'll send it all through. However, if you are thinking about going down the sites on your own, there's lots of things to think about. Now, there's lots of people to help you, as I said before. There's lots of providers that will come and give you sort of free advice, or there's providers that come and give you very cheap advice. But the infrastructure is a big issue in Wiltshire. And there are buildings that I am looking at that I cannot get electrical vehicle charging points into. And I would say that's probably the vast majority of my sites at the moment. I can't get additional electric vehicle charging points in there because all the power to those sites is used up either by the building or by surrounding buildings. So there's a big issue with power, and that requires us working with suppliers. That's the first thing. So heads up with the guys when you start looking at sites, and there's a big issue there with the power in. Another big issue to look at is, and we talk about residence parking, is it is when you look at these sites, on-street charging sites, there's a big issue because what happens is as a council, as yourselves, you probably want people to charge from them, which means everyone phones me up and says, I want an electric vehicle charger outside my house. He said, absolutely fantastic. We're going to start running some trials. We're going to start looking at this. But you do realize if we put a charger outside your house, it will be for anyone to use. And then they start getting a bit cold at the feet, and then you start looking at the pavement, and the pavement's not wide enough. So then you've got to start looking and put it in the road, which means actually you lose a bit of your parking space because you've got like an island in the road. You've got to put barriers up, and suddenly you've then lost the 2 car parking spaces either side of that island because it actually becomes only usable for people charging. And so it becomes a lot more complicated than just really charging at home. So you've got all those sorts of things. So you've got power issues, you've got the practical issues there if you put them on the road, which is why predominantly now they sort of end up in car parks because it's a lot easier in a car park. And people always talk about street lights, but street lights only sort of every 200 meters. You've got obviously most of the power to the street lights is very limited, so street light charging is a big issue in Wiltshire because quite simply the power isn't there. And then again you end up with cables over the pavement, and then you end up with allocated parking for only where you're charging. So there's lots and lots of things to think about, which we're here to help you with, but they're the sort of the practical issues that we're running into. And I'll send all that through to you with regards to like costings and those sort of things. And it's also considerations is for Wiltshire Council, one of the big considerations we are going to be providing the services on our own. So we're not going to be going to a commercial provider for the next couple of years. And there's a reason for that, is because most of the commercial providers that you will engage with will look to tie you in for long agreements, quite rightly so, because they want to make a payback for that. But also the fact that because they want to make a payback, they don't allow you to put, another charger within a certain distance. So you've got to be a little bit careful with the sort of the clauses there with where you're going to go actually with electrical vehicle chargers, because quite simply what can happen is for Wiltshire Council, we could actually limit ourselves to one provider in one area just by having one electrical vehicle charging unit. But that's so where Wiltshire Council is going. We are going to be providing our own electrical vehicle charging units, not actually using a contractor, but many towns do. So give example, Cairn is going with a company called Joju. They're just about to provide their own electrical vehicle charging units throughout throughout Calne. Bradford Avon is using a company called EB Charging, so that there are some really, really good schemes out there that that other councils are using within Wiltshire to fund them, and they're mainly being funded actually by the providers with a small bit of payback from the town. But you just have to be a bit careful with regards to the sort of clauses you're building with, and so that's really where we are. Wiltshire Council is doing a provision. We're happy to work with yourselves on provision, and with regards to those towns I've just spoken about, what we've actually done with those towns in our areas is actually just either licensed or leased, or some cases, asset transferred areas that allow them to actually put the provision actually on our area, on our land, but they are the ones with the agreement. So that's probably a very rush through with regards to electrical vehicle charging. There's a lot to think about, but it's a very exciting time, and the new strategy we have will be out in 2024. Over to yourselves.
Brilliant. Thank you, Adrian. I'll open it for questions in just a moment. I just want to clarify a couple of points, if I could, so that we, the new contract, let's start with what's probably the biggest gripe we have in the town, which of course is, as you say, the King Street charger that's been unoperational now for, you call it a destination charger. You might get to your destination, but if you're depending on it, you won't get back. It's been out of operation now, for 18 months or something. The big concern that I have on this, and I'm sure others, is that yes, we'll get a shiny new one hopefully later this year. Is that guaranteed to work for 3 years? Or if that breaks down in 9 months' time or 13 months' time, are we going to be stuck again with an expensive unit with sticking tape on saying sorry?
And there's another good lesson learned, and I'll share these lessons. So what actually happened with that electrical vehicle charging unit, as with lots of them, modern technology changed. So there was a company called BP Pulse. They provided them and they operated them. And then what happened was their supplier changed the actual units, and so they didn't have the parts anymore. So that's what initially happened with actually all of our BP Pulse units. They became unrepairable, and then because of where the costings were with regards to BP Pulse actually couldn't replace them. So the provision actually was actually by BP Pulse. So just for the next, well, until we get the new strategy in and a new provision in, they will be run by Wiltshire Council, which means if that goes down, that breaks, someone goes and sadly completely written off, Wiltshire Council will be responsible for it, and we can replace that and renew that. That's why we are going to operate that, to avoid the problems that we've actually had with the current provision.
Okay. The one other thing I had was to do with the residential situation, because I mean, in what you were saying, you highlighted what I think we all recognise as a significant challenge, which is as more and more people move over to electric vehicles, a very high percentage of people in our communities don't have the ability to have the infrastructure, let alone the infrastructure to be able to put it in. So a couple of questions on that, if I could. First of all, of course, is Wiltshire's producing its new local plan at the moment. Are we going to be putting conditions, or are we lobbying to put conditions into the local plan that when new infrastructure is built for new estates, they actually do put adequate power in there to be able to deal with rapid chargers or ultra fast chargers, as opposed to the take 3 months to charge your car chargers? Are we going to be looking at putting any requirements on properties to have any of this infrastructure, or at least facilitate the infrastructure as part of the design? I'm particularly concerned about social housing, where the social properties don't actually have their parking adjacent to the property. So you walk down the street to almost like a car park for all the social housing with your number painted on there, but there's no way people in those properties would be able to put electric charging there.
John, it's quite right point. That is a local planning issue. What I can tell you is the lessons that we are learning with regards to where we are, and everything you've said is right, John. With regards to the infrastructure at the moment, time to all those things, it is a major challenge that is being fed back to the local planners for the so the next local transport plan. Also, the local planners are looking at the new the new electrical vehicle charging strategy itself. So it's not being I'm highways and it comes under my sort of my fleet remit, but it will go over to a far more strategic a far more strategic department now looking at that. So all I can tell you is yes, the lessons have been learned. That has been fed into the local transport planners, and I'm sure they are listening to us, but at the moment I can't comment on that because all I'm doing is actually feeding in. I'm positive they are listening to it, but I'm only feeding into them.
But this isn't the local transport plan. This is what's currently the core strategy, and the new version of it will be called the local plan, because they have to change the name every time it comes out. And that, when somebody looks to build an estate or build a house or whatever, that sets Wiltshire's expectations of what we ask a builder to do. And I remember from the core strategy last time round that we were asking about things. Always the answer was, well, you should have talked to the department responsible for that, who would have fed that into the process. So I'm asking the department responsible, what provisions are we building into our local plan to ensure that we have the infrastructure to be able to support this new technology? I mean, I appreciate when we want an extra 200 watts on the high street, that's a challenge because you've got buildings going back however many years. But we've got estates of 400, 600, 800 homes being built all around. We've got car parks being put in on those for retail units or whatever are going in. Surely to goodness, we can make sure as part of our infrastructure plan within the local plan that we are requiring the developers and whoever to be putting the infrastructure in to deal with this.
All I can tell you is we are feeding that in. Unfortunately, it's not myself. I'm feeding that in to all those local sort of those local plans that are coming forward. And that would include obviously my colleagues actually in planning. This was presented obviously at the very high level with regards to the challenge that we face. It is recognised by our planning colleagues and the local transport planners as well. But at this moment in time, I can only tell you I am feeding it in. I can't tell you obviously what the outcome of that feeding is. So all I can tell you is I'm feeding it in. Obviously I will feed back. I will have a word with them and feed back to you after this meeting with regards to what their answer will be to that. But for me at the moment, I'm feeding it in.
That's fair enough, Adrian. I suppose my very final point on that then is, who do we write to at Wiltshire Council? Who should we, as a council, if we want to make this point, who do we send that letter to? Who do we instruct Clark to write to?
It's right. I will forward that because there's just been a change, as you probably understand, in planning. The planning director I was dealing with over this matter it is probably not that appropriate name to give it at the moment in time. So I will get you the name of that person to actually write to at that level.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Simon, you had a question.
Thank you. It's interesting that you reference future-proofing and sort of lessons learned. Do you think that a 7 kilowatt charger is fit for purpose, let alone future-proof in the context of destination charging? I mean specifically Melsham campus, where most people only be there for an hour. You're not going to get much of a charge. You've identified a group of people without domestic charging. So going to the leisure centre as part of their morning routine might constitute a significant part of their sort of charging regime. A 7 kilowatt charger simply wouldn't provide them with the power needed to go throughout their day, whereas a 50 kilowatt charger or something that's a bit more future-proof would. So I would be interested to hear your thoughts on that, and whether you think that in 2, 3, 5 years' time, a 7 kilowatt charger will be of use to anyone.
The way we charge, so the answer to the question is for, in essence, for rapid charging, you are 100% correct. You need, that you can find 100, you can even find 350 kilowatt chargers now. The size is actually, the charging capability is considerable. At this moment in time, and give example of Melsham campus, it's just quite simply at this moment in time in Wiltshire, there are many areas where at the moment in time, the infrastructure, the actual power in is not sufficient at the moment in time to do any more. So give example, Melsham campus would be one of those campuses. The 7.2 kilowatts during the day is probably those three are probably as maximum you can actually have. The way we charge is going to be very, 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 very different, and there's lots of opportunities. Give you example, some of our sites for evening and weekend charging, because power drops during those times, you can have what's called load balancers, and you can do things a different way. But there's lots of limitations at this moment in time on a number of our sites, Melksham campus being one, which means it's either a 7.2 kilowatt now or nothing. And that's really the choice you've got. So 3 7.2 kilowatt chargers is better than nothing. It will allow a charge to know how much charge it is. And then what we've actually got to do is work with those utility providers about getting those power supplies, to buildings. And has been raised, there will be opportunities there with regards to developments and funding, working with providers, because everything, if you go to the electricity supplier and you say, obviously we want more power, the infrastructure, the substations, the digging the holes to get the power cables in, all that's got to follow. So at this moment in time, lots of our sites are limited by the power. But that's why at this moment in time, it's a short-term strategy, because we are very much faced by those limitations. When 2024 comes along, so there's lots of work being done with suppliers, profiling demand to allow us to actually then put, you're quite right about what's needed, but it's all about the right charger in the right place for the right user. And sometimes 7.2 kilowatt will be fine. Sometimes a 3 kilowatt charger would be fine. Sometimes you need a 100 kilowatt charger, but also the fact that the vehicles themselves are changing. So it's about making sure, again, you future-proof it for those vehicles that come in online. So fully accept the challenges. You're quite right. 7.2 kilowatt charger isn't ideal for certain locations, but Melksham campus, as an example, is better than nothing.
Thank you for that. And I don't sort of press on this. I will make this my last question. With all of the heavy plant machinery inside the new leisure centre, is it not a problem with design that we're coming in with electric vehicle charging points towards the end of design rather than at the beginning?
No, and it's the same thing actually with all our buildings, and a lot of it is data led. So for Wiltshire Council itself, actually our buildings are our biggest carbon producer. And so it's about trying to take as much carbon out of the system as possible. So with regard, for myself, I am purely travel. So for me, nothing is more important than travel, but I have to accept that what you have to do is go after, where the biggest electrical supply is, it would do the most benefit. And for Wiltshire Council at the moment in time, if you look at our emerging climate strategy, our emerging carbon plan, you will see that our properties are our biggest carbon producer. So what's happening at the moment in time on a lot of our sites is I have to accept that the property will take priority over the power supply in. We would do what we can, we work around it. And I spoke there about load balancers and all that sort of thing. That's what we're doing while we work with the suppliers to increase the power supply actually in. And that also goes into, solar and all those other things that can actually go with regards to, producing more, sustainable electricity for those buildings, and looking for the alternative provision, because we haven't touched on hydrogen and we've got sort of biofuel that's coming along now and all those sort of things. So I have to be very careful about what we're doing, but that's the reason why, at the moment in time, the buildings are taking a little bit more of the priorities, because at the moment in time for Wiltshire Council, that's where our major carbon spend is.
Okay, any other questions from anyone for Adrian? The one thing I didn't quite pick up, Adrian, when you ran through some numbers earlier on when you were talking about the grants available, the 75% and all the rest of it, and you gave an example with forward the blah blah blah, and you went through it all, and then you ended up saying, and the balance would be what the town or parish would pay. But I couldn't work out what you were saying from what you were saying, what that balance might equate to.
It's a little difficult because I'll give you a worked example of, I was looking at putting 4 chargers in Wilton. And what happened was, with the infrastructure and everything, it came to about £30,000. And I was unsuccessful with my Orcs bid, because quite simply, it's got to be for residents charging, and Orcs said that it was just too far from in essence, the residents actually in Wilton. But had I been successful, I would have got 75% of my £30,000. So they would have contributed £25,000 of the £30,000 to put that infrastructure in, which meant that I would have actually paid £5,000 for Wiltshire Council. Now, Wiltshire Council is looking to do grant funds of up to £2,500. There are, like always, there is little clauses in that, which obviously that will be fleshed out and that will be sent to out. But so give an example there on that particular model, had we've gone through the Orcs and it was in one of the towns that was eligible under the Orcs funding, £25,000 would have gone for the Orcs funding. Wiltshire Council could have put in £2,500, which meant that the town would have had around 2.5. There are other models.
Double check your numbers there, Adrian, because 75% of 30,000 is 22,500.
Sorry, yeah. So in essence, sorry, and that is 22,500. But I must admit,
Wiltshire Council, 5 from the town.
That's exactly that. Yes.
Yeah, 5. Now that answers the question.
I think right. Yeah, we at that time we did get 25. But yeah, it's set up to 75%. Everything is very different. I'll send it all through to you. But putting single charges in as an average, that there are sometimes, well, as an average, they're 13,000, but depending on where your sites are, they can be as high as 30, or they can be sort of as low as sort of 7 or 8. It just depends upon the work that's required, and the funding is 75%. I'll send all the details through though, John.
Okay.
And I'm sorry about my maths.
Clarification, I'll come to you, Simon.
Yeah.
Which is, if the town council said, yeah, actually, let's take Union Street as an example in Melksham, and there's a little car park that comes off of Union Street. We've got major parking problems on Union Street anyway. There's nowhere anyone would be able to charge. So if the town council said, yeah, we'd love to buy 4 chargers that could go into the Wiltshire Council car park off of Union Street, then how would that, I get how that would work in terms of we would pay the percentage and all the rest of it. How would it work in terms of the, if we've put those charges in, are they then Wiltshire Council charges and the residents would be paying you for the electric?
Right, right, yes. There's several ways of doing it. And that's why, but it's probably best we actually have a little working group on this. But if you could, there's a model that's going to be done by Wiltshire Council where yes, we provide the charger, we do everything for that for you. So part of this agreement, we provide the charger, we do, in essence, we look after it for you, and we, in essence, are paid for all that by the charge for electricity. So that's one model, and literally you put your bit in, we put our bit in. Hopefully that we are successful to the Orcs, because there's residents locally that can't, you know, that obviously can't use it. They can't charge at home. So that's one model. What's happened in Calne? They've sought an agreement outside of Wiltshire Council. They've gone to this company called Joju, and in essence what's happened in Calne is the area on which the charger sits, we have actually licensed that to Calne, and they with Joju look after the charger, but they have paid with Joju for that provision, and then Joju manage that for Calne. And there's a different model in Bradford-on-Avon that's coming forward, that Bradford-on-Avon are doing multiple sites with a company called EB Charging, so that there are different models. You don't have to work with Wiltshire Council. The grant funding that we have actually for the 2,500 is linked to the Wiltshire Council funding, but there will be smaller grants that are available that will allow you to go and sort your own provision as Calne or as Bradford-on-Avon have done.
What I was just trying to, and that's really helpful, what I was just trying to understand from that is, so if we're just using Wiltshire Council as the example, because that's the easiest one to be able to talk to, I'm more concerned about, we put those parking spaces in, residents on Union Street or in the surrounding residential areas, it's a perfect example. I can't see how you couldn't get funding for residents there. Say, great, okay, I can come and park my car overnight and get it charged up. Or I can park it during the day and get it charged up. They're then going to be having to buy residents' parking permits to be able to do that and sort all of that out.
Yeah, sadly, the parking restriction, the parking charges, the parking arrangement. Sorry, John, I know what you're saying now. Yeah, they all continue as normal. So yeah, Wiltshire Council at this moment in time does not have any dispensation for electrical vehicle charging. And during the day, it is even a little bit harsher. The fact that if you are charging and your vehicle's charging, it no longer needs to charge. You then remove your vehicle to allow somebody else to come in. So yes, the parking restrictions apply, and there is traffic regulation orders that require you to move your vehicle if it's not charging, to allow that charger to be available for obviously daytime charging. Through the night, that is fine, but during the daytime use, the parking restrictions apply, and you would actually have to move that vehicle once it's finished charging.
Okay, that answers that question. Simon, you wanted to come back.
Thank you. Actually, that was exactly the question I was going to ask. But just a final point of clarification there. Would that not get in the way of us getting funding from central government? Because doesn't it, in effect, cause a bit of a racket that, you know, a resident has to then pay the 500 odd quid for a residential parking bay for Wiltshire Council to be able to access the central government money, which is paid for the charger.
Right, that you're quite, what has to happen, right? We're getting, but with regards to the AUX funding, car parks must be accessible 24/7. And I just read it here. At a minimum, local residents must be able to access the car park free of charge overnight between 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. in the morning. So the conditions actually for the AUX, as we stand at the moment, time for the funding is 24/7 access with overnight charging being, overnight parking being free. That's the conditions actually of the AUX. It is subject to change, and say there's also, again, I won't know more about the new grant funding until I attend tomorrow, but there's even more funding that's been available. There's 960 million just been announced, and that is supposed to be for electrical vehicle charging units that sit outside of current local authority plans. So I'll be able to send you some details through of that again tomorrow after I attended the new grant funding that's just been launched by the government. But they do change it annually. I haven't seen any change in the guidance at the moment in time with what I've just simply said, but it is a government scheme and it can be subject to change.
Do you have a question?
Just a quick one, hello Adrian. So let me just present you with a little query. So if I park my car at 6 o'clock and come back at 8 o'clock and I can put it on charge and I don't pay for anything except the charge, yes?
It's free, or free overnight parking, yes.
Right, but if I came back at 9 o'clock and the car park attendant had been round, I would be up for a parking ticket because my car was already charged. Is that right?
Right. What would happen is, yeah. So yeah, you're quite right. We're getting very much into the details. What we have to do is look at the individual car parks themselves. But first of all, the car parking restrictions apply. So whatever the car park is designated, long stay, short stay, those are still during between the hours of operation. And again, we're not to get confused between the government criteria and our parking criteria. At this moment in time, the parking criteria takes priority. So if it's a short stay car park and it starts at 8 o'clock and it finishes opposite 6 o'clock, that's it starts. But you are right, once your vehicle is charged, and if the parking regulations say at 8 o'clock in the morning that car, if it's charged, cannot park there, under that criteria, yes, you would be eligible to a fine, because the idea is if your vehicle is charged, it really shouldn't be in that bay in the car park, because the space should be made available for a car to charge under the current parking guidance. Yes.
Thank you.
But I think what we've got to do is we've got to run through some models with, because I must admit, I don't know every single parking restriction that's out there. So just make sure that we are compliant with the parking regulations. But if you think about the concept at the moment in time, sadly, with parking is for ourselves. There is obviously our parking system is around certain parking charges which we haven't got any exemptions from. So the common sense is if there's a charge for it, those parking charges apply. And with regards to electrical vehicle charging during those times, the understanding is those bays during the operational hours are there to make sure that that charger is there available to all vehicles to use. So once you've charged, you really shouldn't be there because you're stopping somebody else from charging.
Brilliant. Okay, I don't see anyone else with questions. So can I say a huge thank you, Adrian? I think that was really informative this evening. We look forward to seeing the information that you'll be sending through to Linda. And thank you for so patiently waiting while we dealt with that planning matter at the beginning. So thank you very much, Adrian. We're really grateful for your input. Have a good remaining evening.
Thank you, Adrian.
We will return to our agenda, folks. Strictly speaking, I do need to ask for any declarations of interest because we did this before that. I don't see any. We had the minutes of the previous meeting held on 14th of March 2022. Did anybody see anything on those we need to correct? No, okay. I will sign those as we progress through the next few things, because we've got some catching up still on time. So we move on to planning applications, and our first planning application is PL 2022-02117, 54 Sandridge Road, and it's for a proposed single-storey extension and alterations. So if we can have a look at the plans, that's brilliant. Okay, folks, have we had any representation on this? No representation on this. Comments from councillors, please. No comments from councillors. Any proposals? Proposed, move no objection. Anybody object? No. Okay, so proposed by Pat, seconded by Simon. Could I see all those in favour? That's fine. So let's move on then to PL 2022-01227, the Melksham Hub Station approach and single-storey extensions and alterations again. So we've got a. Let's try the location plan first. Oh no, it doesn't show much on there. We've got the wrong plan. Yeah.
It's for sign. It's not an extension.
I'm only reading what is on front of my head.
I think we've had an update because mine's on the side as well. It's first, definitely just.
Yeah, it does say, just say proposed sign there, not single story extension. And do we have an elevation of the sign? Yeah, the first sign elevation, there you are. Oh, move no objection. Yeah, all those in favour? Fine. Okay, 3 no board. Removal of variation of conditions 01197.
We've done this one before, haven't we?
This is the unplayed closing.
Yeah, well, they're wanting to change the conditions. Do we know what they're wanting to change? Variation of condition 19. Condition 19, let's look at condition 19 now. What I really want to know is what the condition is that they want to change, which was, can you go to the application form? It's what it is that they want to do differently. Right. So they want a minor material amendment to amend the footprint of the approved scheme to allow for the physical construction of extant consent, whatever extant consent is. Keep in the variations. Please refer to the covering letter. Okay, so the covering letter should be.
Does it mean then just change the outline of the building slightly?
It made it slightly smaller. The red line is what's approved. They do that's what they want.
In fairness, on the list of documents, there is not a covering letter, which if that is what's giving us the detail.
Okay, so that's,
Condition 19 has a very great number of things in it, so it would be useful to see the covering letter.
When does consultation close on this? That's fine, that's still a little time to come back to it.
It's just moved a bit, it looks the same size.
Yeah, so the red is shown as it was, I mean, they have changed the design slightly, but not dramatically. They've actually made it only slightly smaller. It's just whatever condition 19 is.
That's fine. And that was fine, done.
Well, case officer, no, in the report, decision notice. That should have a decision or the decision for planning outline, probably the one, the one above I would suggest. Condition 19 is that they've got to follow the plans that they provided. They're changing one of the plans, therefore that's a, so all we do need to concentrate is, do we have an objection to the new footprint that they're, so I'm going to suggest we move no objection. Okay, all in favour? Fine, thank you very much. So we have of course done the final planning application earlier on this evening, which was number 14 Sherwood. So I'll ask you on item 6 to note the decision on 8 Kenilworth Gardens, which was to approve with conditions. We made no objection to that, so it's in line with our recommendation. We've got a couple of highways improvement items before us this evening. So 7.1, highways improvement form Chestnut Mews, Melksham, to request the installation of a no public right of way signpost in Chestnut Mews. Why is that a council responsibility to do?
what is the public right of way?
Who's this coming from? Is it the resident that submitted the highway improvement form or was it councillor?
No, it's a resident.
It's just a little close, so.
It is, it's access to the back of the estate, and it's only the public are parking in their spaces to get to that, so they can't, you park in their own spaces because the public is back access to the campus and the old Melksham Rugby Club pitches, etc.
But it doesn't say anything about parking in the.
So no, I mean, it's exactly the same either side on the other two streets as well.
Oh,
I
is it?
walk my dog there every day.
And does it actually stop people from parking there?
Not that I've seen.
Yeah.
No, it's the same as,
Because unless it says, please don't park here.
But sorry, where are they parking? It says council vehicles use large close, but large close is adopted, so anyone can park there.
yeah, large coast has got an access bylaw to get onto the land, but anyone can park there otherwise. So
Is that all the photos are that are on the next page?
photos just are the access, that's the parking spaces there. The assumption is that the public are parking in their spaces. So they want to say no right of way.
But that is a right of way that runs along the back of
It is.
Arch.
I know, I'm befuddled really what they're trying to get, trying to stop people parking in their spaces.
They're public parking spaces as well.
I don't think they are, I think they're numbered.
Oh,
They're
well,
numbered for
yeah,
their,
yeah.
so it's where people go and take their dogs for a walk, they'll park there for a while.
But the,
But they don't buy them when they buy the house.
if the parking spaces are allocated to a premise, so when you buy the house, you can buy a house and have allocated parking for it. But it's not the council's responsibility to put signage up for that. So I think if this is private land, it's a matter for the landowner to deal with, not a matter for the council. The council cannot erect signage on private land.
I quite agree. There's a lot of demands on the county budget that do fall within our responsibility. Putting signs up in private lands can't be one of them.
So I think, I mean, the first stage on a highways improvement request is that it needs to come through the town council. What I will suggest is, I'm the Wiltshire Council local member for that. So I'll suggest that the result that I go and visit them to make sure that there's a proper understanding of what it is they're asking for and an absolute clarity over the land. And if actually what they're asking for we are responsible for, we can bring it back. But I think the answer is, if it's private land, we can't do it. Are we all happy with that? Right.
Can I just put forward there, while you're consulting with the police, councillor, to just check whether there's no public right of way or no vehicular access?
Yes, well, I want to clarify exactly where they're talking about, because if they're talking about the bit where you walk into the stretch running along the A350,
Yes.
then I'm not sure they're right in that there's no right of way there.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure we've got everything correct. Okay, let's move on then to Chapel Close, Church Lane, Melksham. And so what have we got people asking for here? Okay, so there's a request for double yellow lines to go in.
Just there as well.
Well, we'll ask, the rule with double yellow lines is we're actually asked about once every 3 or 4 years to submit what we want in the parish, because they can do them all on one order. If we want to submit something for double yellow lines outside of the normal cycle, then the requirement is on the town or parish to pay the legal costs associated with it, which would normally be a couple of £1,000. So I'm just trying to picture exactly where this is.
John, the garage used to be, if you remember the garage.
On the right hand side, as you're going down.
Just before you
Yeah.
turn into.
Oh, right, okay, yes. So, somebody who knows that area of town better than me,
Yeah.
is this somewhere that needs double yellow lines?
Certainly it's John, it is, yes, I would say because there's a turning out, yes, and there is a regulation about turnings, isn't there? But there's precious little parking down that road, and there's a lot of double yellow lines already, so it could be very contentious. So, you know, Mark Stansby's going to have to go down there and have a look and make a judgment.
It's a really difficult one because there's always parked cars all the way
up and down on the east side, you get to the top and they're on the side where the fish and chip shop is, and then that bit, it's heavily congested with parked cars.
Yeah.
And always is.
Is this one where it's worth perhaps saying, let's ask Mark Stansby if we could have a site meeting there and have a conversation with him, and then take on board the feedback he gives us and bring us back to the next meeting after we manage to do that.
Because, I mean, in theory, yes, but in practice,
Well, it might be even, but in theory, no. So let's get Mark to meet us there and have a look at it, and then we can bring it back. Sorry, Colin.
Because there could be an issue with traffic, you know, if you have less cars parked, traffic speeds up.
true,
So
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
on church, that's a very important.
Yes, parking is, parked vehicles are the best traffic control that you can have, so, okay, we'll leave the Mark Stansby, and have ask a site meeting to discuss that. I think probably let's make the ward councillors aware as and when it is, and the Wiltshire councillor for there, that's going to be the same as the ward councillor in May, it's in Jack's patch. And invite them along to it. But I think what we need to do is see when Mark and an officer is available, and then say to members, this is when it's happening, come along if you want.
And we need to pick the right time for the meeting as well, just during the day, it's not, we have not empty.
Yes, but it's when we've got the availability of the Wiltshire officer, and I think that wherever the cars are parked, he's going to be interested in the infrastructure, not where vehicles are parked. So his advice isn't going to change depending on what cars are parked where. So, okay, I think that concludes the agenda for economic development and planning. So ironically, it's probably one of the longest economic development and planning meetings that we've had in the